Welcome to Triple C Stories. Get ready for thrilling African folktales, filled with wisdom, adventure, and unforgettable lessons. Don't just watch, like, share, and subscribe to keep these stories alive. The house smelled of cinnamon and citrus, the telltale scent of Lucy's signature Sunday brunch. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting a warm glow over the laughing faces of friends gathered around the dining table. Lucy moved gracefully between guests, refilling glasses and adjusting napkins, her smile as polished as the silverware. Chuka, her husband of 8 years, stood beside her like a magazine cutout, handsome, composed, charming in a quiet way that always disarmed strangers. Together, they looked perfect. And yet, Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible had taken root between them. It was in the way his eyes didn't linger on her as they once did. The way his hand on her lower back felt like muscle memory, not affection. The way he checked his phone during grace and didn't look up when their youngest asked him a question. No one else noticed. No one ever did. And Lucy had mastered the art of smiling through confusion. Later that evening, when the dishes were done and the kids tucked in, Lucy sat in bed scrolling through her old Instagram photos. There they were, honeymoon sunsets, baby milestones, anniversary toasts. In each one, Chuka smiled with eyes that seemed to burn with devotion. She turned her gaze to the man lying beside her, now asleep, his back to her. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. A second later, he turned in his sleep and pulled it under his pillow. Lucy blinked. It had become a habit, one she hadn't noticed until now. A few weeks ago, they used to laugh at reels together in bed. Now, he locked his phone, face down, every night. Was she imagining this? Creating distance where there was none? She shook the thought away, blaming work stress and parenting fatigue. Still, the image of him clutching that phone lingered in her mind like a whisper she couldn't unhear. The next morning, she found herself moving more slowly, more observantly. While folding laundry, she noticed Chuka had changed his passwords. His laptop now required a fingerprint. The new Bluetooth headphones he carried were always connected to something, yet he never used them around her. That evening, while he played with the children in the living room, Lucy opened the shared iPad for a recipe. A WhatsApp notification appeared at the top of the screen. Just one line. Same time tomorrow? Can't wait to see you. A red heart emoji pulsed at the end. Her fingers trembled as she swiped it away. It could have been anyone. It could have been work. But it wasn't. Her body knew it wasn't. She sat there frozen, spoon in hand, staring at the glowing screen until the pasta began to boil over. She didn't speak of it, not that night, not the next morning. Chuka remained affectionate, even more so than usual. He brought her coffee in bed. He complimented her outfit. But instead of reassuring her, it made her wary. When had he last looked at her with love instead of strategy? Something was shifting beneath the surface of her life, like hairline cracks in glass. Tiny, nearly invisible fractures that promised to break everything in time. Lucy told herself it was probably a mistake. A message meant for someone else, an old colleague, a group chat, even a bot. She clung to that rational explanation like a raft in deep water. Chuka hadn't changed that much, had he? He still kissed her goodbye every morning. Still called her baby when he walked in with groceries. Still laughed at her terrible impressions of their toddlers' cartoon voices. But in all that sameness, something felt off. The "I love yous" were mistimed. The eye contact held too long or not at all. Lucy started watching him the way one studies a stranger who claims to know you. At dinner, she noticed how he picked up his phone whenever she left the room. When he laughed at a meme, he angled the screen away. And each time he caught her watching him, he smiled just a second too late. It wasn't detachment. It was a performance. A tightly choreographed one. And it unsettled her more than any fight could have. One evening, after a particularly tense silence during dinner, Lucy called her younger brother Somto and asked if he was free. They met at a quiet rooftop bar, surrounded by soft jazz and the smell of grilled suya. She told him everything. The message. The silence. The change. Somto, always blunt and protective, leaned in and said, "Trust your gut, Lucy. You're not crazy." He offered to trace the number that had sent the text. He even joked about running a light spyware scan. But Lucy recoiled. "No. I'm not ready for that," she said. She didn't want to be that woman, the one who snoops, who stalks, who assumes the worst. Part of her still hoped she was overreacting, that this would resolve itself, that she could wake up and find it was just anxiety. Still, she agreed to give him the number. "Just the basics," she said. "No hacking." Somto raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right. Just the basics, for now." That night, as she was hanging up coats left carelessly on the back of the dining chairs, Lucy's hand brushed against something hard in the pocket of Chuka's jacket. It fell to the floor with a dull thud. Her breath caught. A phone. Black. Slim. Unfamiliar. Not the one he always carried. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her fingers hovered over it, her heart pounding like a warning drum. She picked it up slowly, like it might explode. It was locked, of course. No identifying marks. It vibrated once in her hand before going still. She placed it back into the pocket exactly as she'd found it, palms sweaty, ears ringing. Chuka walked into the room moments later, cheerful, humming a tune, and she smiled at him, forcing her face into something neutral. That night, lying beside him as he slept, Lucy stared at the second phone on the bedside table. Not the familiar one with the red case. The other one. The one he thought she didn't know about. His hand was curled loosely around it, even in sleep. Lucy watched him in the moonlight and whispered, barely audible, "Who are you?" Lucy woke before the alarm, her body rigid with resolve. The truth was no longer something she feared, it was something she needed. Her hands moved with quiet determination as she made breakfast for the children, exchanged pleasantries with Chuka, and packed school bags with practiced ease. He kissed her forehead and said, "See you tonight," like he always did. She waited until his car left the driveway before pulling out her phone and calling Amoka, an old friend from university and now a telecom engineer. They hadn't spoken in months, but Amoka didn't hesitate when Lucy asked if she could trace a number. "Send it over," Amoka said. "I'll be discreet." Within the hour, Amoka confirmed that the second phone had a consistent location pattern. Tuesdays and Fridays, same time, same address, across town. Lucy felt her stomach drop. It wasn't random. It wasn't a fling. It was a routine. A second life lived in measured beats, like a clock ticking down the truth. Somto helped cross-reference the address. A residential neighborhood. Quiet. Middle class. Nothing flashy. Just normal enough to hide anything. Lucy didn't tell Chuka she was taking a day off. She told her mother she had a legal workshop and asked her to watch the kids. Then, with trembling hands, she followed Chuka's car in her own, keeping 2 lengths behind. Every red light felt like a dare. Every turn he made felt like a test. Her heart thundered in her chest as he finally pulled up outside a modest bungalow tucked between 2 trees. He exited the car casually, holding a plastic bag that looked like groceries. Lucy parked half a block away, her breath shallow, her grip on the steering wheel white-knuckled. She couldn't move. Couldn't blink. Couldn't believe that this was her life now, staking out her husband like a stranger. Then, it happened. The curtainless front window lit up as Chuka stepped inside. Lucy craned her neck slightly, just enough to see. He wasn't alone. A woman appeared, slim and graceful, cradling a baby in her arms. She turned slightly, and Lucy froze. The baby was no more than a year old, chubby cheeks and a head full of soft curls. But it was the eyes. Chuka's eyes. That unmistakable almond shape, the deep brown irises flecked with amber. Lucy's breath caught. Her vision blurred. The betrayal hit her like a slap, but it wasn't just the child. It was the woman. Something about her face stirred a memory, distant, but sharp. She didn't know how she knew her, but she knew her. The edges of Lucy's world began to curl inward. Her heartbeat drowned out the sounds around her. "No," she whispered. "No. It can't be her." But the familiarity clawed its way to the front of her mind, uninvited. And then, nothing. The wheel slipped from her hands as the darkness overtook her. Lucy fainted in the driver's seat, the window fogging slightly as her breath stilled into silence. Lucy jolted awake in the driver's seat, her vision blurred and mouth dry, the inside of the car too hot, too close. Her heart thudded violently as she remembered the window, the woman, the child, the eyes that didn't need DNA to tell the truth. But it wasn't just the baby. It was her. That woman's face had dug into some buried corner of her memory, scratching at something she hadn't thought about in years. Lucy drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel with hands that trembled no matter how tightly she held on. She didn't speak to Chuka when she returned. She smiled at the children, pretended to have a migraine, and lay awake until dawn with a knot in her stomach. She didn't cry. Not yet. There was something worse than heartbreak building inside her. Recognition. She spent the next day rifling through old folders on her laptop, combing through pictures from her time in law school, searching with a desperation that terrified her. It didn't take long. The photo was buried in a volunteer appreciation email from the women's shelter she once worked with. There she was, Lucy, bright-eyed and hopeful, flanked by a group of women. And there, standing just slightly apart, was Maya. Younger. Thinner. But unmistakably the same woman. Lucy stared at the screen, her chest tightening. Memories rushed back in waves. Maya's dry humor, the scar on her shoulder, the way she held her tea without drinking it. She had been strong even then. Hardened. And Lucy had admired her for it. She hadn't thought of her in years. Until now. The flashbacks returned like smoke under a door, seeping in, impossible to ignore. Lucy had helped Maya leave a violent partner. Maya had refused pity but accepted help. They shared late-night conversations over instant noodles, stories of survival and silence. Then came the trial. Maya's ex had friends in dark places. Lucy had volunteered to testify, armed with notes and naive idealism. No one had told her Maya's immigration papers were incomplete. No one told her that testifying might expose Maya to the system in ways more dangerous than the man she was escaping. After the trial, Maya disappeared. There was no farewell, no explanation. Lucy assumed she had returned home, started over. She told herself she'd done her best. But now, seeing her again like this, in that house, with that child, made the past feel freshly shattered. She whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of Maya and the girl she once was. "What did I do to you?" Lucy didn't knock. She stood outside the modest house for a long time before lifting her hand to the door. She half hoped no one would answer, that maybe she had imagined it all. But the door opened almost instantly, like Maya had been waiting on the other side. She smiled, not warmly, but politely, like they were old classmates catching up. "I thought you might come," she said, stepping aside. The air inside was scented faintly with lavender and baby lotion. Toys were neatly arranged in a corner, and a high chair stood near the window Lucy had looked through just days ago. Maya moved with unnerving calm, offering tea that Lucy declined. The conversation began with silence, broken only when Lucy asked, "Why him?" Maya didn't blink. "He came to me," she said simply. "You were just elsewhere." Then, with a small smile, "I'm not here to ruin your life, Lucy. I'm just living mine." What followed was not a fight. It was a quiet unraveling. Maya confirmed the affair. Confirmed the child. But there was no gloating, no apology either. Just a kind of knowing. She denied any romantic attachment. "This was never about love," she said. "You always assumed love was the answer to everything. That's your problem." Lucy sat frozen, every word like a needle sliding under her skin. Maya's voice was low, calm, calculated. "You always got to be the hero. The woman who saved others, walked away glowing. Ever wonder what happens to the ones you leave behind?" The room seemed to tilt slightly as Maya stood and opened the door. "You don't even know what this is really about. But you will." Lucy walked out without looking back, her mind spinning with questions she hadn't thought to ask. That night, Lucy said nothing to Chuka. She watched him as he told a silly story to the kids over dinner, his laugh a little too loud, his gaze never quite meeting hers. When he asked if everything was okay, she smiled and kissed him softly. "Everything's fine," she replied. But it wasn't. Her silence was no longer born from shock. It was strategy. She moved deliberately now, each action laced with quiet intent. She copied photos of his bank statements, downloaded MetLife from shared cloud drives, logged calendar inconsistencies, and photographed the second phone while he slept, curled protectively around it like a child's comfort object. The betrayal wasn't just intimate, it was logistical. A trail of digital footprints leading deeper into a lie she now knew wasn't random. It had depth, design, and perhaps a beginning long before she ever suspected. The living room was dim, save for the flicker of Somto's screen and the dull hum of his computer. Lucy sat hunched beside him, her nerves frayed and fingers clenching the hem of her sweater. They hadn't spoken much since she arrived, just exchanged looks heavy with implication. Lucy had handed over the external drive, filled with everything she'd quietly collected. Odd transfers, duplicate calendar entries, screenshots of Chuka's calls. "Just find what I'm not seeing," she said. Somto had nodded, jaw clenched. As he sifted through layers of cloud data, folders began to surface, ordinary names masking encrypted content. "These aren't regular backups," he muttered, already opening a terminal to decode them. After an hour of silence, a folder cracked open. Inside, voice files. No labels. Just timestamps, stretching back more than a year. Lucy put on the headphones, bracing herself. The first voice was Maya's. Calm. Cold. "She took everything from me," she said. "She left me behind like I was disposable." Lucy's pulse quickened. Then Chuka's voice replied, too soft, too steady. "Then let's finish what we started." The audio was nothing like what Lucy had expected. No laughter, no whispery romance. It was chillingly sterile. Deliberate. Conversation after conversation centered not on love or lust, but on her. Her choices. Her perceived abandonment of Maya. Lucy sat frozen as Maya dissected her life, her family, her law career, her marriage, like a blueprint for revenge. She got to be the savior, Maya said. I got deported. I lost everything. And she just walked away. Chuka never protested. Never defended Lucy. He agreed. Supported. Planned. Her name was spoken like a problem to be solved. Not a woman. Not a wife. Lucy's skin crawled. The betrayal wasn't a wound. It was an excavation. Layer after layer peeled back to expose that this wasn't infidelity. It was war, and she'd been the battlefield long before she even knew there was a fight. Hours later, Lucy drove home in a daze. Her mind was quiet now, not with peace, but with a hollow focus. The version of Chuka in those recordings was unrecognizable. Not weak. Not tempted. Intentional. She entered the bedroom like a stranger, watching him sleep soundly with one arm flung over a pillow, his second phone still glowing faintly on the nightstand. She didn't touch it. Didn't touch him. Instead, she moved to her desk, pulled out a clean notebook, and sat beneath the weak light of the study lamp. For a long time, the page stayed blank. Then slowly, carefully, she wrote. 1. Maya, motive unclear. 2. Chuka, deeper involvement than assumed. 3. Me, what did I really do to her? She tapped the pen twice against the paper. Her breath shuddered. The question didn't scare her anymore. It haunted her. And she knew now, the real answer hadn't even begun to surface. Lucy sat across from Chuka at the breakfast table, the clink of her spoon in the cereal bowl the only sound in the room. She watched him with quiet calculation, asking a question so casual it barely registered as loaded. Do you ever think about your family? The ones you never talk about? Chuka blinked, caught off guard, but recovered with a shrug and a sip of coffee. Not really. Why? She smiled and let it drop. But in that single blink, she saw something. A flicker. Something too practiced. Later that day, Somto called her. His voice was tight, breathless. Lucy. I found something. He explained how he cross-referenced Maya's ex with court records, and then pulled a sealed case file. It listed Chuka's surname, same as the ex's. A shared father. A different mother. A hidden branch of family Chuka had never acknowledged. Maya's abuser was his half-brother, Somto said. The words rang like a bell inside her skull. Cold. Final. Her testimony years ago had put a man in prison, and in the process, tore apart the last shreds of a broken family. Chuka hadn't just betrayed her with Maya. He'd been nursing a grudge that spanned bloodlines. The courtroom came back to her in sharp flashes, wood-paneled walls, flickering fluorescent lights, her own voice rising with conviction. She had believed she was doing the right thing, standing for justice. She hadn't seen the boy in the back of the room, 20-something, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on the man being sentenced. She hadn't known him then. Wouldn't meet him for another year. And yet, she had already stepped into his story without knowing. Lucy felt dizzy with the realization. This hadn't begun with a marriage, or an affair. It had started with that courtroom. With her voice on record. With Chuka's silence. Had he known all along who she was when they met? Had he buried his rage beneath charm and timing and the long con of love? Her hands trembled as she reached for her water. There were betrayals, and then there were betrayals dressed as destiny. She thought she was building a life with him. But maybe he had been rewriting one all along. When she returned home, Chuka was on the phone, laughing at something mundane. She stood in the doorway, watching. There was a split second, so subtle, so slight, when he saw her and faltered. Just a hitch in his voice. A skipped heartbeat. He ended the call too quickly. Everything okay? He asked. Lucy nodded. Fine. She didn't ask about his half-brother. Not yet. She didn't mention Maya, or the sealed records. She simply watched him move through their house, her house, with the ease of someone who had long ago memorized a script. Every smile now looked like a mask. Every gesture felt rehearsed. She wondered how many parts of their life had been written for her. How much had been real. She looked at him and no longer saw her husband. She saw a stranger who had once sat in the back of a courtroom, watching her dismantle what was left of his family, and who had waited silently for the perfect time to return the favor. Amaka's voice was sharp through the speakerphone, the kind of voice that didn't need drama to make an impact. She was never deported, Lucy, she said. She left on her own terms. It was strategic. The weight of it settled in Lucy's chest like wet cement. Maya's story, of being ripped from everything, of Lucy's testimony leading to her exile, was a lie wrapped in half-truths. There had been risk, yes. Uncertainty. But no forced removal. No government agents at midnight. Just a departure. A calculated exit. Amaka explained how Maya resurfaced months later under a new alias in Port Harcourt, running small business workshops and quietly re-entering circles where no one would recognize her. She shaped that story for one audience. Your husband, Amaka added. And it worked. It wasn't just sympathy. Maya had found the crack in Chuka's foundation, his guilt, his family trauma, and slipped in like water. What Lucy thought was a love triangle was now a hall of mirrors. The betrayal wasn't about hearts. It was about leverage. Somto's findings only deepened the horror. Chuka's recent business deals, at first glance legitimate, were laced with phantom LLCs and suspicious transactions. Money moved through shell companies, contracts signed with names that traced back to Maya's alias. It wasn't just cheating, it was laundering. Fraud. The recordings began to make more sense. Maya's tone, once vengeful, grew colder, more directive. Let her think it's just about the baby, she said in one clip. Keep her distracted. Maya hadn't just wanted to hurt Lucy. She needed her to stay confused, tangled, passive. Chuka, financially drowning, had leaned into the scheme, letting guilt, old wounds, and misplaced loyalty blind him to the truth. He thought he was reclaiming a stolen legacy. Maya was rewriting one. Lucy listened to the audio late into the night, the baby's cries faint in the background of one file, and realized the child wasn't proof of love. It was bait. She arranged for the DNA test without telling anyone. A private courier, a discreet lab. She didn't even open the results at home. She sat in her car, hands shaking, and read the line that shattered the last illusion. Probability of paternity, 0%. Chuka wasn't the father. The child was never his. The affair, the betrayal, the financial spiral, none of it had been anchored in truth. It had all been scaffolding. 2 days later, Maya was gone. Her number disconnected. Her apartment emptied. No sign of the baby. No forwarding address. Nothing. Except for a single envelope on the kitchen table with Lucy's name. Inside, one handwritten line. You never looked back. I made sure you'd never forget me again. Lucy read it twice, then once more, and sat there, unable to cry. It was never just revenge. It was obsession, crafted, fed, and weaponized. And all this time, Lucy had been trying to salvage a marriage. She hadn't realized she was clawing her way out of someone else's trap. One built not from love, but from the need to leave a scar deep enough to be remembered forever. The recordings were delivered quietly. A link to a hidden cloud folder, with carefully time-stamped audio files and an encrypted archive of Chuka's financial misconduct, landed in the inbox of a senior investigative journalist and, simultaneously, a special crimes officer. A mocker helped route it through multiple VPN layers. There would be no digital fingerprints pointing back to Lucy. She didn't want fame. She wanted truth to float to the surface without her name attached. The fallout was immediate. By morning, the headline screamed scandal. Prominent Lagos lawyer implicated in fraud and secret double life. The audio clips circulated widely. Chuka's voice, calm and complicit, played on radio and Twitter Spaces. Video reports dissected each minute of recorded betrayal. The court ordered an investigation. Chuka was taken into custody before the week was out, his stoic image now smeared by the weight of exposed deceit. His lawyers claimed manipulation, claimed love. But Maya was gone. No testimony. No defense. And that, more than anything, shattered him. Lucy stayed out of sight. She kept the children close, answered no questions, gave no interviews. Friends messaged in hushed concern. Some suspected. Most didn't dare ask. She let the narrative spin itself. But alone, at night, she created something else. A voice of her own. The second phone was quiet at first. Just her voice, slightly disguised, recounting moments without names. Betrayal disguised as love, secrets wrapped in charm, the silent unraveling of a home. She didn't speak like a victim. She didn't rage. She told stories. Stories that sounded like other women's. Stories that echoed. Each episode ended with a single question, left open like a door. What would you do if the person sleeping beside you turned out to be the ghost of someone you wronged without knowing? The podcast grew slowly, then rapidly. The inbox filled with anonymous messages. Some terrified, some thankful, some confessing their own stories. Weeks later, Lucy walked alone through the park, the early morning sun spilling gold through the trees. Her steps were light, not because the weight was gone, but because she was no longer holding it for anyone else. She stopped by a quiet bench, pulled out her phone, and checked the stats for her latest episode. The listener count had doubled again. One IP caught her attention, anonymous, but pinging from a remote network with no traceable source. She stared at it for a moment, then smiled, just a little. It didn't matter who it was. Chuka. Maya. Someone else watching from the shadows. Whoever it was, they were listening. Her final words from the season echoed in her mind. Sometimes, justice doesn't look like a courtroom. Sometimes, it's just being heard. She closed the app, stood slowly, and walked on, not looking back. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe to Triple C Stories. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section and stay tuned for more exciting stories.